All right, welcome to another video of Online History with Mr. G, where I bring you AP US History curriculum right here from my classroom, as you can see, right to your computer screen. So today, the question that we're tackling is, how did the founders honor the intention of the 76ers? Now, I don't live in Philadelphia. This isn't the basketball team, the 76ers. This is the generation that fought for American independence in 1776. So how did the founders honor the people who fought? Because they're not the same people. So while I erase our guiding question, that's what I'd like you to be thinking about here. Okay, so when the Revolutionary War is done, there are a lot of questions that have to be resolved. The biggest one is, what type of government are we going to have? And really, the better question is, what does the new government look like? It's a better question here, because if we ask, what type of government do we have? We can say, well, we have a republic, which means that people rule themselves and there's no hereditary privilege. So if you're George Washington's son, which he didn't have any sons, but if you were George Washington's son, you don't inherit anything. That would be hereditary privilege. We don't have that in a republic. But we can say we want a republic, but what does that actually mean? What does that mean for, people who don't live in Washington, D.C. or Philadelphia, which is the original capital, or New York, which was the capital at one point? What does it mean for people who live in, Virginia, in Georgia, in New Hampshire, and other places? So what does this new government look like? And the big debate that was set up, and this is really the crux of this lesson, the big debate is over what's known as the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist. And this is nothing more than, how big should government be? And really what it comes down to is, are we going to replace the Articles of Confederation with the U.S. Constitution, or are we not going to? So the first attempt at making a new government was this Articles of Confederation. Now the war is done. We have defeated Great Britain. Great, but we need laws set up. We need some sort of structure. Really what we've done is we have taken let's say the government is represented by this box, and there's all this power in here that is known as Great Britain, and we've kicked them out of here. Cool. So now we have this box that's empty. Now the worry is that Great Britain could just come right back. So if we don't have a government in place, if we don't have a military, if we don't have a navy, if we don't have the ability to raise money, if we don't have the ability to make alliances or treaties, we're very vulnerable to other countries attacking us. So we need a form of government. It's known as the Articles of Confederation. It is the first attempt at a government, and it is not a great set of rules. And I've got a separate video coming on the Articles of Confederation, but the sort of short version is, it was too weak for the executive branch. The executive branch is essentially the president, the commander-in-chief. And the Articles of Confederation was very much a reflection of what the 76ers and the founders feared from King George in England. King George III was tyrannical, didn't listen, didn't feel he needed to listen, all these other things. So we rebelled against them. But when we rebel against them, we need to replace it with a new government. But if the problem was that the person in charge was too powerful, well, we don't want to have that same problem here. So we're going to make the person in charge really weak. So that was the Articles of Confederation. The problem was it was too weak. It was too reactionary. It was too impulsive. And so the Articles of Confederation needed to be replaced. And most people seem to agree with that. I don't know of an instance where people disagreed with that. The question was, did the Constitution go too far? Did it give the federal government too much power? And I have a separate video on the Constitution as well. But the big thing was, Do we want this Constitution? Is this a proper response to the Articles of Confederation? And this leads to the great Federalist and Anti-Federalist debate. And the time period we're talking about here is 1787 through 1788. Just to orient ourselves on what's happening in the world, this is right around the time or the beginnings of the French Revolution. This is about 10 years before the XYZ affair. This is right around the time where Washington's becoming president. This is, 15 years after the beginning of the revolution. This is 3 or 4 years after the end of the revolution. So it's kind of a really interesting rebuilding phase. We have just declared independence from the biggest country in the world. And we've said we want to have our independence because we want to rule ourselves, which is something no other people's ever done before. So what is this going to look like? So I'm imagining right now, and I think this is a pretty safe assumption, that this would have been a terrifying time. It would have been a very exciting time. People probably wondered how long would this last until a country like England came back and just sort of took over. So Federalists and Anti-Federalists. Federalists, and I'm going to orient what does this mean and why do we care in just a second. Federalists were people who wanted the Constitution. They wanted the Constitution. Anti-Federalists didn't necessarily not want it, but they wanted it with the Bill of Rights. Federalists were people who wanted a large government. Large government. Anti-Federalists were people who wanted a small government. Federalists tended to want a national bank. I'll just put no here to that. Federalists also tended to be more in favor of a standing army. This means a permanent army. And I'll put no to this too. In parentheses, I'll just put militia. This side also tended to be pro-British, and this side tended to be pro-French. People love names, right? So famous names from this side, you're thinking Hamilton, Madison, and Jay, really. And then from this side, Thomas Jefferson. Okay. So two different groups of people. And what's really interesting about this is people needed to come together. We had an agreement that the Articles of Confederation were not working. So we're going to replace them with something. Well, we have this Constitution here written by James Madison. Do we want to go with that? Cool, now we're at an impasse. We need to figure out how to work through it. So how do we work through it? What Hamilton, Madison, and Jay did is they wrote, and it's mostly Hamilton, they wrote a series of essays that were later called the Federalist Papers. And it's a series of more than 80 essays. I forget the exact number, I think 83, 85. Series of essays that appeared, that they published in newspapers throughout the country. What they were doing was they were trying to justify replacing the Articles of Confederation with the Constitution. So they were hoping that people would get these newspapers and read these essays and read about Hamilton's ideas on representative government, or the worry of factions was a big one that they talked about. And these essays were widely read, widely discussed. This is 230 years ago. This is well before television. This is well before, cell phones. What people cared about was what type of government were we going to have? What was it going to look like? Are we going to be free to own property? Do we have to pledge something to somebody else in exchange for something like some sort of servitude or indentured servants or anything like that? Are we going to be able to keep what we currently have, or do we need to give it to the state Do we owe the state money? Does the state owe us money? All these questions. How do we vote? How old do you have to be to vote? What does elected office even look like? How long do you serve? Who's eligible to serve? How many times can people run? What are the different kinds of offices? Is there a governor? Is there a magistrate? Is there a judge? Is there a, whatever? All these questions needed to be worked out. And what's really exciting about this is all of this is up for grabs. Like, wherever you are watching this video, think of the structures that are in place. We all exist like here. And maybe in your life you move to, this square, or maybe this square. Maybe you move down to this square or this square. But at this point, the country is like this. And you're here. And you can more or less go anywhere you want. You can start a business. You can run for political office. You can become a judge or a lawyer. You can move to someplace else if you want. All these things are up in the air. And that's what makes this a really exciting time period, because we're figuring all this out. And these men who wrote about this, who discussed it, they were extremely well read. There's a historian by the name of Bernard Balin who's got a number of really great books talking about this. The origins of the thought of these gentlemen are rooted in great philosophers from, just shortly before the Revolution, going all the way back to ancient Rome and ancient Greece. And people would have written in French and English. They would have brought in, Latin, Greek, all these different languages, different thoughts and theories as they were deciding what type of government do we want. And so what ended up happening was the Constitution ends up getting passed with the caveat. The Constitution gets passed with the caveat that the Bill of Rights is going to get passed as well, which it does. And that suits both sides. So this is Federalist, this is Anti-Federalist. And what's interesting is you can chart this out and say 1787, 88. British, French. And you can say XYZ affair. 1797. You can say no war, war. This is War of 1812. You can follow these people in this. You could put Adams, Hamilton, Jefferson. You can follow this train of thought all the way through the first 50 years or so of United States history and see how things shake out. It's very, very interesting and cool and stratified, which is really kind of unique. But getting back to the main question of how did the founders honor the 76ers, what the 76ers wanted was the ability to choose their own government, the ability to have some sort of say. If you're going to take money, if I'm going to make $100 and 30 of it is taxes, so I really have $70. If you want me to be okay with that, better yet, if I commit a crime, if I shoot someone and I go to jail, if what you want is for the masses to not rebel, if you want them to accept the punishments, they have to feel like they have some sort of say in the setting up of the laws. They have to feel like they have some sort of say over this $30. Because if you don't like it and you think that's too much, cool, make it $20, so now you have $80 in your pocket. But if you feel like you don't have control over that money, what difference does it make what you make? It's going to get confiscated anyway. So the founders And what I mean by this is the Federalist Anti-Federalist Debate, and really this is the Federalists. What they did was they expressed their own viewpoints in, the form of essays, which were public. This allowed for public discourse. This allowed for people to be able to talk about, what does our future government look like? Do we want this or not? The people would have met and discussed it and then leaned on the representatives from their states who were voting yay or nay on it. And so the way it works now is a bill is proposed in the United States. A representative, I'm in New York State, a representative who I've never met, votes on my behalf. I will never meet this person unless I donate a lot of money. What happened back then was people met, they discussed, and you let your representative know how you felt about it. And they went and they voted one way or the other. In fact, it took a long time to get the Constitution approved and ratified because of this public discourse. So this discourse allowed people to actually express their views, positive or negative, on the Constitution. And in so doing, in making these essays public, in bringing the discourse to the people, the founders were honoring what the 76ers fought for by giving them the opportunity to listen to and learn about and then vote on and express their opinions on what type of government they wanted having any kind of control over their lives. That to me is a really, really important thing. They could have just as easily stayed where they were. They could have just as easily said, here's the new government. They didn't. They brought it back and they said, here's what we have come up with. What we want to do is we want to discuss it. If we're in agreement, if we like it, we'll go with it. If we don't, we'll go back and we'll keep working. But by bringing it to the people and allowing for that discourse, the founders were very much honoring what the people in 1776 fought and died for. Okay, if you like these videos, please like, share, subscribe. I am a AP US history teacher in upstate New York, hence the sort of terrible whiteboard and the background noise and the distractions, but you're in the classroom with me. So if you like these videos, if you like how authentic they are and sort of, basic, please like, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff, and I'll keep bringing good content to you. Thanks.